And welcome. It's Mary Ellen McGonagle here with your Friday afternoon MEM Edge show. And this is the show where we bring you where the action is in the broader markets. And it was a choppy period, highly unusual with that Wednesday holiday sitting right there in the middle of the week. So I feel as if we had two different weeks take shape. And of course, as always, shaping the market's price action was some of the data that was released. Earlier in the week, we did get industrial production numbers, and it showed the largest increase in 10 years. Now, the good news there is that money flows did go into the industrial sector. This is what we want to see, a broadening out of the markets beyond those big mega cap tech names. We also did get numbers on retail sales, and it came in only slightly higher in May. That was a bit disappointing, although there were some retail winners that we will get into. And then jobs data did continue to cool. That was Thursday. And also we did get S&P services and manufacturing indexes, which climbed. So a lot of mixed messages relative to economic growth, and the markets reflected that. I will take a look at some of these newer sectors and share with you a couple of interesting names from there. But I do want you to be aware that next week, we will get core PCE data. This is the Federal Reserve's most closely watched data for inflation. So anticipating volatility going into that number. And then we're also going to get the second revision for Q1 GDP. Those are the most impactful going into next week. But let's go ahead and take a look at what happened last week. And here we are with the daily price chart of the S&P 500. Now, we did not close at a new high. However, on Thursday, we did hit another new high and pulled back slightly from that. Today's price action also, we can see that overall, the broader markets for the S&P 500 was up about 0.5%. And we do have this RSI coming in from an overbought position. It is still overbought up here at 71. And also we can see that this MACD is up here in positive territory. We don't want to see that MACD black line down through the red, although it does not mean a sell signal. It could signal a pause, but net, we have a nice uptrend here in the S&P 500. As always, we're going to drill down beyond those broader markets, take a look at the 11 sectors in the S&P 500, a 2-month daily price chart view, and then adding this relative strength indicator, sorting these sectors in descending order. So here we are with technology, and it was up less than 0.5% this week. We did have this strong rally going into that midweek holiday, which then fizzled into the close for the week, but certainly not entirely unexpected. We were quite stretched after this really nice uptrend that took shape over the prior 6 trading days. We also got into a bit of an overbought position, and you can go back historically and see what can take place when we get into an overbought position as far as pullback possibilities, but still currently in an uptrend. So as we move through, we can take a look here at healthcare. I'm going to share with you areas there that pushed this group into a market performance, 0.6%, but net that uptrend very firmly in place. This is a good area where if you are heavily loaded in tech, I would say to broaden out into healthcare. There's a lot going on as way as innovation and growth with new medical products and so on. Now, this is an area XLY among the top performers, up 2.4%. Nice rally into today's close. So this is an area of the market I've been on the lookout for to eventually participate as far as some of those high growth names beneath the surface. And I will share with you a couple of them, but good to see the discretionary area moving up here to this forefront. Another strong area last week, XLC. By that, I mean, it was up almost 1%, but take a look at that chart. Nice pullback to that 21-day simple moving average, forming the right side of a base, and then the metrics for the momentum, RSI and MACD in positive territory. Going through these other sectors here, you do want to be aware of some of these areas that are pulling back. Before we do that, I did want to share with you the industrial sector and the move into that area. Now, unfortunately, we are poised to close the week just below that key 50-day simple moving average. And likewise with that RSI just clinging to positive territory. We do have a nice MACD crossover, black line up through the red, but ideally we would like to see further participation within the industrials so that we could again see a bit more by way of broadening out. Some of these weaker areas, energy was the top performer, up 2.4%, all about the price of oil, but we do generally are very much in an overall downtrend with that energy group. So let's go ahead and move through and take a look beyond these sectors. You really want to get very refined as far as being aware of where strength versus weakness is emanating. And up here at the forefront, we do have the broader market indices sitting up here. But let's take a look. IGV, now this is the software ETF, another area that rallied into Friday's close. And we can see this downtrend reversal that took shape the prior week. We also have positive momentum with that RSI and MACD. And as it relates to software stocks, there are about 330 names that are publicly traded, but I will tell you only a third of them are trading above this key 50-day simple moving average. This is not a group wide relative to participation. It's not similar to this period in November when a number of software names came into play. So be selective as you move through and potentially participate in this downtrend reversal in those software names. Up here at the forefront, semiconductors, they were strong going into Wednesday and then pulled back. This is part of what I will be sharing with you further as it relates to this AI trade that is getting a little tired. So semiconductors, we can see we did get into an overbought position with this RSI. So a pullback certainly not out of line, keeping an eye on that potential MACD crossover. We can go back to this March period as precedence. I am not anticipating that simply because this move quite a bit lower was all about a rising interest rate environment. Of course, next week's inflation data could temper that, but at this time, interest rates are remaining steady. In fact, we will take a look at that. So here we are, Brent crude. I talked about the price of oil up last week, 3.5%. And we can see it did get above that 50, but we're not seeing the move into energy in any kind of a broad-based way. I talked about healthcare. Biotechs had a nice rally today of 1.2%, a little bit dicey, but we will be looking at a couple of names in that group that are exhibiting interesting characteristics. IHI is another medical products. This is going to be your growthier area of the healthcare sector. I have two names on my suggested holdings list from this group that are really continuing to outperform, and that's of course what we want to see. Down here in this lower quartile, take a look. KRE, it did have a bit of a bounce up 2%, but you can see that your momentum potentially shifting, keeping an eye on this area, but not ready quite yet. And then also taking a look here at the yield on that 10-year treasury, and you can see we are remaining by and large down in this 4.2 level, which is generally good news, certainly for growth stocks. Now, from here, I did want to share with you that the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 1.5%. It was the highest performing of the broader market indices. And I wanted to share with you those stocks in the Dow that actually did exhibit high outperformance last week. And this is something that you can very easily do if you put together any number of lists and then ask for a summary view. In this case, I'm asking for the 1 week. What were those names that drove the Dow Jones Industrial Average to outperform? So here we have the weekly performance. From here, you can take a look at this Stockcharts technical rating, and the higher the number, the better. If you can get up to that 80, that would be a sweet spot, 75, 80, if you're looking for candidates. But what I did want to point out to you here is really relevant as it relates to what took place in the markets last week, and that is your better performers. There was an awful lot of bottom fishing. For instance, this 2.6, 6.2. We can take a quick look at Intel, which was up 2.7% as an example. And you'll see very much a down and out stock, not ready for prime time, but again, indicative of what took place last week as it relates to those top performers. We will take a look at your biggest losers last week too, again, as a way to really decipher what took place last week. Here is McDonald's. We did get a gap up today, but at the end of the day, it is a very damaged stock. And again, bottom fishing coming in. Now, Home Depot is one of these retailers that is looking interesting. I may have mentioned this last week because we had this gap up, and then we are seeing a nice continuation rally. This is one of the retailers I did want to share with you. I'm going to add a 5-day simple moving average to the chart, and in essence, it then acts as support. Once you see that gap up into an uptrend, this 5-day can be really quite useful. Pullbacks to that level are an ideal buy point. MACD just now getting into positive territory. Now, from here, I did want to take a look at some of the names that did not fare well last week. We'll just take a look. I have a screen that I run not regularly, but I do run it fairly often, and it is comprised of stocks that are year-to-date winners. In other words, they far outpaced the broader markets. I look at this screen when these names pull back. Oftentimes, they present an ideal buying opportunity, but this week, the year-to-date winners list showed a number of names similar to this. This is AVAV, Environment, and you can see this very sharp pullback. The stock had been up 62% year-to-date going into this week. We're going to take a look at another year-to-date winner that had been up almost 60%, Palantir, and again, this break. And then today, the stock was down 7%, sharing with you a couple of other stocks just really to confirm what did take shape last week. ONON, the stock had been up 65% and pulled back. Last up, PSTG. And in essence, a lot by way of potential profit taking. This is Pure Storage. You can see this pullback. It had been up 85% year to date. Now, the good news is, and this is what I talked about as far as using this list, these names are winners for a reason. Oftentimes, they will have strong growth prospects. And what we can see is that buyers did come in on today's dip below that 21-day simple moving average. So we closed in the upper reaches of the trading range. And then we have that RSI up here in positive territory. So it could potentially be a buying opportunity on that pullback. But again, noting last week that those stocks that had been big winners were hitting new highs. They did falter last week. Let's take a look, and I feel we would be remiss to not take a look at Nvidia, because this is also exemplary of what we've experienced. And you can see going into Thursday, the stock had hit yet another new high, but it did post a reversal day on Thursday and then pulled back today. So what we can see is that the stock is sitting just at that 10-day simple moving average, but it did close just below it. We also can see that that RSI is trending downward, but that's not a bad thing. We are certainly in an overbought position after this sharp advance. The one thing that you do need to be quite aware of is if we do get that black line down through the red, and that is not a sell signal, but it is an indication that this sharp uptrend has shifted. Now from here, whether it shifts into sideways price action or more is going to be very dependent on whether it finds support at this 21-day simple moving average, using the low here as your next key area, and then that 21-day. But of note is the pretty high volume on the selling over the last 2 days. So we could be at a critical juncture for the near-term price action of Nvidia. Now let's take a look. I talked about XLY, Consumer Discretionary. I'm going to share with you some of the names that really held in well last week and look compelling. This is Dick's Sporting Goods, DKS. And here's that gap up on earnings. Subsequent to that, and this will happen, the stock digested that big move, found support above this 10-day simple moving average, and now is exhibiting a base breakout beyond that, with that uptrend still remaining in place. Another retailer of note here that gapped up on earnings, Burlington stores. And again, this back and fill period of consolidation into a nice uptrend poised for a base breakout. Also, you can see from my screening, which I will share with you, is that discounted retailers are really on the move higher. This is Ross Stores, another gap up on earnings, pull back into another base breakout. And then we can also take a look at TJX, which is hitting a new high in price. The company is really on fire here. We can see this uptrend very firmly in place. However, we are currently in an overbought position. This is more just as an example of the fact that these discounters are some of the top performers. On the downtrend reversal side, there's another thematic move. This is Autozone. So these auto supply companies, and you can see this move up above each of these moving averages, pushing AZO into an uptrend, MACD now in positive territory. Another stock that is in the same industry group that was a top performer last week, and that is ORLY, O'Reilly, ORLY. And you can see as these shorter term moving averages begin advancing above their longer term, that is called a golden cross. Now we've had a significant advance here, certainly do a pullback. This is where that 5-day simple moving average will really come into play. You do not, of course, as always, want to chase stocks. So we'll go ahead and add that, and you'll see it takes us to that 1053 as a pullback possibility. We're also overbought, but it is of note. And from my work, when I see these downtrend reversals, I like the fact that the stock has historical precedence of outperforming, and then also the fact that there is group movement that is taking place. Last up, we'll take a quick look here because XLF, I talked about that industry group faring relatively well, and you can see this move back into an uptrend, and it was not bank related, but let's take a look at a couple of names in the financial area that fared well. By and large, it was life insurance companies that are continuing to have the ability to increase their premiums. Now, again, this is a bit overbought. This is Primerica with that MACD just getting into positive territory. Let's take a look at a nice 3% yielder. This is Metlife, and you can see it's in the throes of potentially reversing its downtrend, and we are back above that 50-day. Nice high volume. I would like to see that MACD get into positive territory to confirm what could be a new uptrend. Other name in the financial space, we can take a look at Mastercard. And again, this is a stock that was a big outperformer coming out of this downtrend reversal in the markets in November. The stock has sat out a large part of the rally, but take a look. We are in the throes of reversing that downtrend. We're back up above this 50-day simple moving average. We have a positive RSI. Let's see if we can get that MACD up into positive territory, but nice high volume on that downtrend reversal that took place there. And last up, I did want to share with you a view of the equal weighted indexes. For instance, with the S&P 500, this is our SP, the Invesco S&P equal weight. It was up 1.1% relative to the S&P, up 0.6. Not overly exciting just yet. We're not getting the momentum, but it is certainly encouraging that the possibility of seeing a nice broadening out beyond the funneling into those Magnificent Seven names. Here's QQEW. This is the Nasdaq 100 equal weighted. It was up 1%, and this is relative to the Nasdaq, which was flat for the week. So keeping an eye on this as well. And that's it for this week. Everyone have a fantastic weekend. If you like what you've seen, go ahead and hit that like button. As always, questions are welcome. And I'll look for you here again next Friday.